Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's SANS webcast. Top tips for safeguarding your business with mobile app vetting. Sponsored by Zimperium. My name is Mary Lynn Gollier of SANS. Today's featured speakers are Lee Crognelli, SANS Certified Instructor, Monique Becenti, Director Endpoint Security Product Marketing at Zimperium, and Krishna Vishnubatla, VP of Product Strategy at Zimperium. If during the webcast you have any questions for our presenters, please enter them into the Q&A window at any time. Please note that this webcast is being recorded, and a copy of the slides and recording of this webcast will be available for viewing later today and can be found on the SANS registration page. And with that, I'd like to hand the webcast over to our presenters.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Like Mary Lynn said, my name is Dominica Lee Crognelli. I am a co-author and instructor for 585, the Mobile Device Forensics course. So obviously, when I get a chance, I heard that Zimperium was going to do a talk. I kind of jumped at it because their topic is near and dear to my heart. We don't, one of the things that we do from a forensic standpoint is maybe try to analyze the device after an infection has taken place. But their product is really great at getting in front of the problem. I fortunately had an experience where I got to work in a large government agency where we did a lot of mobile application vetting, and it's a lot of what their product is able to do. With huge government budgets, you can do that on a large scale, or you may need to do it on a smaller scale for your individual business needs. And this product makes it simple and easy to do. So I'm really excited to learn about it too. Without further ado, though, I'd like to introduce both Monique and Krishna to introduce the product and let us know a little bit more about it.
Dominica, thank you for that lovely introduction. Folks, as Dominica mentioned, right, we wanted to take the time to talk a little bit about mobile app vetting. The term has been around for a while, but it's morphed over time. But before we do that, just a quick, you probably see a quick poll on your screens. When you get a chance, please do answer. We're trying to get a better understanding of, in your businesses, how much you use third-party apps versus developing your apps and things like that. That will help us better tailor the conversation to your situation. So we'll just give it another minute or so and let everybody get in their poll in. A few more seconds. I see people are answering the questions. Very interesting.
And while you guys are answering, just make sure to ask any questions you have as they come up. We want to keep this as conversational as possible. I know I am very curious about some of the things that they can do and how it would help facilitate some of the needs that I have where I work. So please keep your questions rolling in and we'll try to get to those in real time.
All right. Let's end the poll. I'm just trying to see. So results. 26% allow employees to download personal apps on work devices. That's always an interesting challenge. 30% third-party apps and push them to worker devices, something that we've seen even a lot more post-COVID. In-house mobile apps, 16%. All of the above, 26%. Okay, so you'll love this conversation based on what I'm seeing. Thank you for that. Let's head to the conversation. So Monique and I, we're part of Zimperium, and we have a unique role in our business. Zimperium, if you have not heard about it before, we are a mobile security company, and we really solve two problems. One, if you're allowing employees to access enterprise stuff on their devices, whether it's personal or corporate owned, we help you ensure that you're giving access to devices that are safe and secure. The other side of what we do is, if you're in the business of building mobile apps, we help ensure they are secure and compliant, right? Because we have mobile apps on both sides. but they both need different types of security. So let's dive into the conversation, and both Monique and I will kind of give us our perspectives about this topic and what we're seeing, what customers are telling us, and what we've learned over the past 8 to 10 years with over 350 customers. So the agenda, real quick, is we'll talk about what is app vetting, and I think this is important because Monique and I have seen this term, its meaning morph over time. We've seen the word MARS be used a couple of years ago. It used to be Mobile Application Reputation Service. Now we call it app vetting. So there is a little bit of genesis to this. Apps in scope, what to look for, right? App vetting, when we talk about it, makes sense. But when you start getting specific about, well, how do you know good app vetting versus bad? I think it's important for everybody to understand what should these tools be looking for and why that's important. What's hurting adoption, right? When we talk to customers, everybody says this is a good idea, but not everyone has jumped on board. And we've learned a lot of things in the last 5 to 8 years. We wanted to kind of share our learnings as to what might be some of the hurdles in this process. Now we're a mobile security company, so we have some solutions around this. I'll take a few minutes to show you what we have to offer and how you can adopt this without a lot of friction. And then if you are interested, then where do you go, right? How do you get started without taking on a huge lift? Okay, so let's get started. App vetting, right? This term has been written about quite a bit, especially since 2019, right? The traditional definition, as you see, has been evaluate the app, look for certain types of vulnerabilities before your app has been published, right? You will see some variances of this definition depending on who's talking about it. We've seen NIST extensively write about it, even going back to 2019. CISA has a service, OWASP, NIAP, MITRE. All of them have some form of literature around this, right? They all talked, when they started talking about it, it was more about apps that were being pushed to employee devices, right? A lot of the focus was around those apps. And you can imagine when you go to public sector, these might be GFE or let's say government furnished equipment. So there was a lot of concern around the app going on an employee's device, and if a third party was building the app, how do we manage these things? And so app vetting from then to now has morphed. Monique, I know you deal with this space a lot on our mobile threat defense side. What has been your sense about people using and asking you about app vetting? Oh, did she freeze? Okay. She might have frozen. We'll just give her a minute for her internet to catch up. So really, the one thing I wanted to talk about is we're talking about what is app vetting, right? But when we talk to customers, what the question they're really trying to answer is, does the app conform to our security requirements, right? They are looking at app vetting and they're saying, can this type of a solution help us answer that question? Are these apps conforming to what we need, right? That's the real question they're trying to answer. And they're looking at these standards and they're looking at us as solution vendors saying, can you help us, right? So that's the problem we're trying to solve. But if you look at the last 4 to 5 years, right? The way a business interacts with mobile applications has changed quite a bit, right? Initially, they were apps, work apps, as we call them, to help employees become more productive, right? That used to be the genesis of that conversation. But now when we interact with what we call mobile-powered businesses, they are using mobile apps for more than just that. They also want to grow their business. So you end up with mobile apps interacting with your business in 3 different ways, as you can see, right? 1, productivity. I want my workers to access enterprise information from anywhere, any place, on any device, and I want them to be productive, right? That's the predominant remote work way of thinking about it. The other thing we have seen is, because you want them to be more productive, They're also procuring third-party apps. What do these look like? Zimperium, for example, we have Salesforce mobile app, we have Expensify, we have Concur, Jira, Confluence, and the list goes on, because traditional enterprise tools like an Atlassian have developed companion apps for all their software, right? So those tools that were just deployed on your server infrastructure have now made it onto our mobile device, right? But you didn't write them, right? Those are third-party apps for your productivity. And the last but not least is these businesses are interacting with their customers with mobile apps, right? We do a lot of business with banks. And as you can imagine, we probably have 5 to 10 financial apps on our phones. So mobile apps have become a great digital channel for growing business and engagement, right? They're very powerful to engage with your customer base. So something that started as vet the apps you're pushing to your employees' devices has now broadened to where businesses are saying, we interact with apps in more than one way. How do we ensure they don't compromise our data and our customers' data, right? So the scope that problem has expanded significantly. Monique, looks like you are back. Any thoughts on what we're seeing? Oh, wow.
The current applications, we're not really talking about it as much as we should. And overlooked. Yet, it's crucial for safeguarding. And mobile apps, should be considered and look
Monique, you're breaking.
about which applications are in scope.
Okay, thank you, Monique. You're breaking up a little bit, but I think the gist of that is I think a lot of this is being overlooked, right? And I think that's one of the things we're also trying to help when we speak to customers is don't just worry about productivity apps, but also look at all the other apps and the way they interact with your business.
Krishna, can I ask a customer-based question for you?
Go ahead.
So are you finding that your customer base is more, kind of like that? I have a corporation, I'm provisioning devices for all of my employees, and you're protecting against those apps and determining what we want to allow and what we don't want to allow on those company-owned or agency-owned devices? Or do you see it more of a BYOD type model where you're bringing your personal phone in, you want them to be productive, so you want them to have all of these necessary apps that actually communicate with kind of your back-end business tools? Do you have like a breakdown for us?
Not necessarily a breakdown, but it's a great question. So most of the businesses when we say mobile powered businesses, what we see is most businesses, whether they're in the enterprise segment or mid-market or smaller businesses, both of them want to give their employees access on their own devices, right? I think a couple of years ago, everybody was a fan of, I will give you a government or a corporate owned device. But I think 83 to 85% of our customer base does not want to give them a second device, right? They have a lot of pushback from employees saying, I do not want to go back to the BlackBerry world and carry 2 phones, right? They want one device, they want it on their personal device. So I would say 85% of our customers are BYO. And the others are slowly moving unless you're a government, right? And you have specific regulation preventing that. And their problem is, if I take, for example, Zimperium, I have 156 mobile apps on my phone. I don't even know why, right? And it seems like there's a new one every day. And Zimperium is asking the question, how can I make sure the personal apps you have doesn't compromise the enterprise's security, right? And this is a common problem in enterprise and SMB, wherever you go. And they're all asking that question. Makes sense? Yeah. So what does app vetting mean, right? So as we define, there is there are two problems here, right? Once you start looking at the problem. One is vetting public apps. I'm an employee of Zimperium. I am constantly downloading apps that I love, but I'm using that same device to access Zimperium's enterprise data, right? So if you look at the footprint on my phone, I have my personal apps and my work apps on a device that I control, right? And that is the reality of mobile, right? If you looked at web, your web application is deployed on your infrastructure that has like $6 to $10 million worth of perimeter security around it. But unfortunately for mobile, Zimperium has to deploy their application on my $2,000 device that they can't tell me how to use, right? And that's what makes mobile so risky, is you can't control that hardware. So when we're talking about vetting apps, personal apps that employees are downloading, and the question becomes, how do I make sure these apps don't pose a risk to the enterprise, right? So the solution is looking for characteristics that a personal app could have that could threaten the enterprise, right? So it looks at the app with that lens in mind. Monique, are you back by any chance?
Are you able to hear me now?
Much better. I know this is your area of expertise. Why don't you
So
give
am I
us
supposed
some insight? Go ahead.
Absolutely. You know, what does app vetting actually look for? Something that
Monique, we lost you again. Sorry, let me chime in. Right. So these apps, folks, when the solution is looking at public apps, right, we have to be very careful because the enterprises that are using these apps don't own the source code of that application, right? And without looking into the source code, you're trying to give the business a sense of how safe is it for your employees to use these apps. So it looks for things like, does the app have any malware, right? Has someone embedded something in this application without you knowing, right? Is your supply chain maybe gotten infected without the vendor knowing? Privacy, right? When you think about these apps, they use a lot of data, personal apps especially, right? Privacy has become the new currency. We just click away. We just want to download the app, so we say yes to every permission they have. So we are looking for things, whether it's permissions or something you do, that from a privacy or security perspective is not great, right? These apps could be asking for a lot of permissions on your phone or access to a lot of your data. And we see this quite often where even the consumer, an end user like me, is not aware of it, right? Come out of compliance. There are a lot of apps that enterprises are uncomfortable having on their employees' devices. A couple of years ago, a lot of enterprises were not comfortable having cloud storage applications on their employee phones. They were worried about data leakage, right? They were like, oh, not going to make it that easy for you to download and ship a box to your Dropbox account, right? There's a lot of concern, but over the years, there are a lot of such characteristics that made enterprises uncomfortable, right? And they were looking for solutions to say, I would like a way to say these apps have these characteristics and I want them to mark them out of compliance, right? So we were looking, these solutions look for these characteristics. And then the origin. Most of the apps that we download, right? We never think about where is the data going, right? We volunteer so much of information into these apps, but we never think about it as where is the data going, right? We kind of trust the brand and we go for it. But a lot of times when we tell enterprises the data is going to Russia, South Korea, China, right? It raises a red flag, right? So where is this? Where is the data going? Where are these URLs going? What are these IPs going? So when we are vetting public apps, we're looking at it saying, do they pose a threat to your privacy or security? Right? And we're trying to rate the app. Go ahead, Dominic.
Yeah, I have a question, and I always put on my forensic hat when I hear kind of, how the mobile app vetting, process works. So, we talked, like you talked a lot about kind of the more on like the developer side, but when you touched on the kind of the origin maybe, or the behavioral type aspect, like do you do a lot of that looking more in depth to how a person, a human on the other end is using an application? Because what comes to mind for me is, 10 years ago, every single application had its data, backed up as part of a standard backup process, whether the backup was encrypted or not. And then, maybe a few years later, well, we'll only back it up if it's encrypted. But, do you also look into, more detail to see, like what if a person plugs their phone into a computer at the library and accidentally syncs it or backs it up, or what kind of data leakage would occur there?
Yeah, so one of those two things, right? One, when we look at the app, we look at it statically and dynamically, because some things are more obvious when we start running the app like an average person would use it, right? So we are able to see things like, ooh, you connect to Amazon for cloud backups. Interesting. How secure is that connection to your Amazon cloud? Right? And I have some stats later on. You would be surprised how many apps use cloud but don't secure that configuration. Meaning you could be using Amazon, you could be using Google, any of these cloud storages, right? Which by themselves are secure, but the developer does not take care to make sure that configuration is secure, right? So we are able to look at some of these things and say, these are not great things to do. And these apps are doing these things. And it could be just somebody overlooked it, right? But we do point that out because to your point, if an enterprise is using it, or if someone's using it, they want to know, good or bad. We do look at a lot of that. And that's what happens on the other side, right? When we're vetting public apps, we try to sum up this data that we found in a way to help you make a decision. Should this app be allowed on your employee's device? Are you comfortable or no, right? That's what they're trying to decide. But if I apply app vetting to the other side and say, what about the apps you built? Or a third party is building for you, but you own the source code. There are a whole bunch of problems there as well, right? You might be creating the problem if it's your app. So on that side, the tools need to look for different things because you own the source code, right? Are you using libraries that are not in your best interest, right? Because mobile apps, the way we develop them are like Legos, right? 70% of that code could be third party, right? Well-known, open source, proprietary, all good and great. But how comfortable are you with how they're tested? And most of the times the answer is you don't know, right? We kind of pick the most popular open source, go look at their community. We kind of try to infer some security from it sometimes, and we go, right? So for apps that you develop, we're able to look at things way beyond just security and privacy, right? We can say, have you built your app in a way that's resistant to somebody else tampering with your app, right? How would you do, right? What if there was malware next to your app, right? Could it compromise your app? So we're able to go down to that level. But the reason we put both of these things here is the audience for both these type of app vetting are different. One, on the left-hand side, the enterprise is saying, all these apps are on my employee devices. Am I comfortable giving them access? On the right-hand side, we have the entire mobile app team saying, we are building apps. We need to vet them before we put them out on the stores. But right, so different audiences, but apps impacting the enterprise. Both of them equally important. So you asked a great question, right? We have so many apps Some of them, when you look at them statically, say something. When you start running them, you might see blackout, all these other different behavioral type of things that we might be uncomfortable with. So we looked at a bunch of apps and we said, is there really a need for app vetting, or is this just vendors trying to push their solution through? Right? Because, we know that. So we looked at, as a company, right, we look into close to anywhere between 60 to 90 million devices each year, right? New devices coming into our customer base. And we are seeing, just looking at the applications on these devices, the number of samples, malware samples we're detecting in these apps jumped 50%, right? Which is insane, right? We always read articles that, oh, malware is a problem, But our data is corroborating that malware is a problem. And it's quite a big problem in the way it's manifesting itself, right? Let's look at some other stats. Cloud storage. Everywhere we go, we hear businesses want to build cloud native apps, right? That is the thing to do. Great. But the way that cloud connection is secured is very, very important. And we see a lot of mobile apps that have inadvertently looked over that, right? So yes, you are using cloud efficiently. The cloud providers themselves give you great options to secure that connection. But app developers are not using the right configurations, and that's not great, right? Jailbreak and rooting, right? Another fun topic, right? Folks, most of you are familiar. If not, jailbreak and rooting is something that we would do on our phones. Traditionally, to customize the phone was to use an app that the phone or the OS traditionally doesn't allow, right? Android has a lot of what they call mods or modifications that can make your phone look very different. Like, I own a Jeep. It's a very similar analogy. I want my Jeep to look very different from all the other Jeeps on the road. A lot of folks with Android phones are the same way, right? They love to download these mods, modify their phone in a way that Android or the manufacturer doesn't want you to, but they do, right? That's your personal choice because it's a personal device. And that, when you do that, you lower the security on your device. People do it anyway, right? But what we're also seeing is when we see devices that are compromised, a lot of people think, oh, I jailbroke my phone or I rooted my phone. That's okay. I'm okay with it. But what we're seeing is 43% of these devices that are compromised were never jailbroken, right? That means something you did on your phone, most likely an app or a phishing link you clicked on, actually compromised your phone and you don't even know it. And this is what enterprises are worried about, because once I compromise your phone, it doesn't matter whether your enterprise app is in a container of some sort. The malicious actor can see everything that's going on your phone, right? So enterprises are worried about not just the apps you're downloading, but also how safe is your phone? Because if your phone's compromised, so is my data.
And Krishna, that's such a good point, because I think like a lot of people are like, well, I don't jailbreak and I don't root, so I'm immune to it. And they also think, well, I probably have a kind of shady app in the first place, and that's how that infection got in. And those of you that are maybe iPhone users and have been iPhone users forever, you're probably like, well, you can't even get malware on an iPhone, right? For some reason, around September of each year, it seems like there's a major a vulnerability that's disclosed. And it's usually in something like iMessage, something that we all have. And I don't know anyone that doesn't use it if you're an iPhone user, right? And the crazy thing about some of these exploits is it doesn't require you to do anything out of the norm, right? You get a message delivered to your device. Who doesn't get messages? You don't have to click on it. You don't have to do anything, and your device is already compromised. And I think that just really brings a really hits home point to that some of these devices that are vulnerable are devices that, for what we know, we're keeping up to date. We got the latest and greatest apps. We got the latest and greatest firmware. There's really nothing that you as a user can do until Apple pushes that patch out, or, a patch comes out from your Android provider or telecom.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, right? Because I think the general notion around Apple devices is they're more secure than Android. But there's a lot of stats, right? If you look at the zero-day exploits that have come out in the last 18 months, more on iOS, right? There's a lot of security patches. And whether people will like it or not, we're not great at upgrading our phone, right? We're always worried it will slow down the device, so we don't. So your phone is actually quite vulnerable for long periods of time. And if you combine that with what you said, where I can send you a text message with the URL and your phone's compromised, that's very, very powerful and worrisome at the same time. Code samples, right? And I point this out because most mobile applications, like I said, are built like Legos. We use a lot of other people's code when we build apps. And what we're seeing is 23% of all code samples is iOS and Android submitted into a public repo were malicious. And this propagates. Why is this so high? Most developers, and I've been one for a long time, you are going into public repos to find snippets of code features that are well known, maybe for authentication, maybe for other features, and reuse them, right? We're kind of built to do that. It's very efficient. But we're seeing that infiltration is happening at the code repo level. And most of these developers that are going and getting these code don't really have a lot of tooling to say, I wonder how safe this is, right? They have source code scanners. Source code scanners will only go till a certain point, right? You don't know how that code works when it starts interacting with a whole bunch of other components, right? So we're seeing these malicious aspects in multiple dimensions across the market. So it is important for you to start thinking about mobile app vetting when you look at this. Adoption. So why isn't everybody already on this, right? So we've been doing this for 8 to 9 years, from when app vetting was really called Mars and through now. And here are some of the things that customers tell us, right? Businesses, keeping up with app updates is not easy. This is true, right? I have 150 apps, and every week there are about 83 updates on my phone, which is insane. I feel like I just updated all of them yesterday. And this is not just a tooling concern, right? This is also a capacity concern for businesses. The tool will tell you whether an app is good or bad, or an app version is good or bad, but someone needs to decision on it. And how do you keep up when 50,000 employees with 100 apps on their phone, and these apps are getting updated every week, right? So they're looking for the right tool, capacity, the expertise to manage that, right? So it's not easy. Hard to identify characteristics of an app that make it risky, and why. And this is a problem that when you start operationalizing or think of operationalizing something like app vetting, it comes into play. Because today you might not like a social media app, but what are you going to do? Block it? You can't. It's a personal device. You cannot tell people, don't use Instagram, don't use Facebook, don't use Bumble. You can't, right? So what the enterprises quickly realize is it's not the app, it's certain characteristics of the app that I'm not comfortable with. And is there a way to identify what those characteristics are and then do something about it? A lot of solutions can tell you whether an app is a good or bad, but they can't say it's these 3 characteristics about the app that are driving your concern, right? Because if they had that level of clarity, then you could do something with that information. Automation. What do you do once the solution tells you the app is bad? Okay, now what? Does that mean I should block every upcoming version of that app? Or is it just this one version? And this happened with WhatsApp. There was one version of WhatsApp a few years ago that went nuts because everyone's like, it's got this one vulnerability. They have to patch it. They have to patch it. But that was just one version, right? How do you control for some of these things? When you see a vulnerable version, can you automatically take action as an enterprise? Can you tell your MDM to do something with the access that you've given somebody, right? Can you automatically reduce that access? And maybe when they update their WhatsApp, you can give the access back, right? So a lot of app vetting is really to do not just with identifying some of these things, but can you automate? Can you talk to my other security tooling and help me do something about it in real time, right? Otherwise, it's a very manual problem. You cannot scale. Fourth is what we see a lot. Most tools with mobile security, you will see cannot keep up with evolving threats and risks, right? Because in mobile, you have four main vectors. If you think about it, right? Look at what we do with our phones. We wake up in the morning, you go online, look at your favorite apps, read the news, you're on your Wi-Fi. You step out. If you're someone like me, I travel a lot. I go to the airport. What do? I connect to my Wi-Fi, connect to airport Wi-Fi, right? I know I shouldn't do it, but I will. And then I'm downloading apps. My friends send me a bunch of URLs and funny videos. I click on them because they're from a trusted sender, and we go on and on and on. But the risks are evolving across all of those, right? They are some Wi-Fis, which are not really Starbucks. There are some URLs that I think are funny, but are installing malicious things on my phone. And I'm downloading games from third-party stores because they're cheaper, which are not really great for you because they might have malware in them, right? So the threats are evolving across all these different dimensions, and it's really hard for a security vendor to keep up. And that's what the enterprises are asking is, if you can keep up with them, then I don't need to worry about it. But you don't have a lot of vendors that are able to keep up. Last but not least, different personas. And this goes to the primary definition of app vetting. There is a persona within a business that says, my employees are downloading public apps that I want to make sure do not pose a risk to the enterprise. That's one persona, right? The second persona is, we are developing mobile apps. How do we make sure we're not introducing vulnerabilities and putting enterprise data and the customer's data at risk? So when you think of app vetting solutions, you need something for both, or else you end up solving only half the problem, right? And you need to be able to give them information in a way that allows them to make good decisions, right? So those are some key things that the tool might tell you something, but is it right for the persona? And customers over time have told us all these things have kept them for truly adopting or embracing app vetting, right? And we ourselves have had to solve for these things over the years, and we're seeing much better intake. So this is not just about solution, it's also about what can we do as vendors to make this operational, right? Frictionless adoption is also a big part of this.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to ask about like employee pushback, like does that happen? And to go back to one of your points, you mentioned MDMs and, having your MDM then once you've identified some kind of vulnerable or sketchy app. So mobile device management, do you guys integrate your
Yes.
product with different MDMs? And, is it most all of the popular ones on the market these days?
Correct. So mobile device management, or I think UEMs, as they're referred to these days, they are great at inventory management, right? That's kind of their genesis, right? Provisioning. How do you provision 100,000 employees at scale? They're really great for doing that. Over the last 2-3 years, they've also integrated some basic security measures, right? But predominantly what they do, and there are about 12 of them on the market that are dominant, they integrate with us, right? We are referred to as a mobile threat defense vendor. So we're like the security sensor for the MDM. And what the MDM does is When we integrate with them, they tell us when there's a problem, and we will take appropriate action, right? We might remove your access, reduce your access, or do something else, but they're relying on us to say, the app is not safe anymore, right? Or the risk is above your tolerance level, and you need to do something about it. So it's a great integration, and we integrate with all the big 12 out in the market. All right, so how can we help? So as I mentioned before, Zimperium is a mobile security vendor, right? And the two sides of mobile security that we help with is one is where businesses say, we want to give employees access as long as their devices are safe, right? We call this solution mobile threat defense, and app vetting is a part of this solution, right? This is the solution. It's nothing but an agent that sits on the mobile device, and there is a SaaS console that it talks to, right? So the agent assesses and looks at everything going on the device. The console is capable of analyzing all these apps, and together they give information back to an MDM or a SIM or whatever your security infrastructure is to say, this device, because of these reasons, is no longer considered safe as per your standards, right? And it does this in real time. So let's take an example. You got up in the morning, you have full access to your enterprise apps. You went to a restaurant connected to the Wi-Fi. As soon as you connected to the Wi-Fi, mobile threat defense, our solution would tell the MDM, that's not a safe Wi-Fi. I would not let them access enterprise data on that Wi-Fi network. What does the MDM do? It immediately pulls your access back, or it sends you a message. I'm sorry, I'm not going to let you look at your email or access something because of the Wi-Fi you're on. Please connect to a safer Wi-Fi, right? As soon as you disconnect and go to a safer Wi-Fi, it provisions all your access back. And we do this seamlessly with MDMs. So for an enterprise, this is scalable security, right? And the app vetting portion of this is looking at all your apps, right? So we look at applications, which is the app vetting portion. We look at all the phishing URLs, the malware on your device, the apps, not just malware apps, but apps that you're downloading, which might be unsafe. The device itself, right? Is your operating system up to date, right? Do you have vulnerable hardware? So all of this stuff we package together, and enterprise use this to say, is the device safe? Can I give them access or not, right? That's one side of app vetting. The other side, as I mentioned, for businesses building mobile applications, right? We have a whole set of tooling that allows you to ensure from the beginning you're building security by design, right? And I won't dive too much into it, but essentially we're answering the question, is your code, your keys, and your data, are all of them safe the way you've built your application? If not, we can help you with that, right? So on the right-hand side, we're scanning and providing information to a developer. On the left-hand side, we're scanning the app and providing to a security admin or somebody who is responsible for mobility, who's saying these apps are compliant and these apps are non-compliant, right? Different personas, different solutions, but both have app vetting in them. We just call it something different, but we're exercising the same engine for that. So let's so what does this look like, right? We've talked a lot about app vetting, what it needs to look for, but how does this all come into play for security people, right? What does this mean for you? So let me give you a quick sneak peek of what this looks like. Give me 1 second, and I will switch.
While you're getting this set up, and it's funny because Kyle from the audience has asked the question that I was just about to ask too. You just went and said to us, a step back there, that your product requires that the employees install an agent on their phone. That agent reports back to your tools, so you get a little idea of what's going on in the device. Is there a lot of pushback with your customers and having their, employees install an agent on their device? And can you talk a little bit about what these agents do and do not do? I think there's a misnomer that, like it's reading all your WhatsApp messages and, all these things that people think that they are capable of.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, right? Couple of years, we've been doing this for 8-9 years. And early on, there used to be a lot of resistance, right? They were like, oh, that's Big Brother looking over my shoulder. Why would I let an enterprise look at what I'm doing with my phone? But when we got into the root of it, what people are worried about is the way security vendors, they believe for a long time, the only way for you to tell me that my phone is secure or not is by you looking into my messages, my emails, my browser history. That's what they were worried about. They were worried about privacy, right? And the way we're able to do this successfully and why we're a leader in this space is our mobile threat event solution is not using that information to assess completely whether your device is safe or not, right? Our core technology is starting to look at operating systems, kernel. There are fingerprints on your device on how it behaves that allows us to say we're bad behavior, right? Now, the second question, how are we protecting you from phishing if I'm not looking at the URL, right? That's the other question we always get. So the privacy issue really comes from the fact that not that a security solution is assessing the URL, is that they end up sending these URLs in your browser history to a cloud, right? That's the friction point that a lot of enterprises and legal teams and workers' council have. We're able to do this because the technology we have on your device is assessing the URL, but isn't sending the data anywhere. So it is telling you, the end user, first, do not click on that, right? Please do not click on that URL. And and the solution can be configured in a way to say either send this data to the security team or nope, we have to be GDPR compliant, keep it on the device. And we can do all this without that data never leaving the device. And that's what helps with the pushback, right? You do have a class of vendors in this space that have to send everything to the cloud to determine whether something is good or bad. And our differentiator has been, we can make that assessment on your device and that data never leaves, right? And that's really where the privacy friction comes in. And that's how we've been able to kind of resolve it and reduce the friction that employees have.
Thank you.
Makes sense? No problem. All right, I'm just gonna log in real quick.
And keep your questions coming. I'm asking questions, for my own purposes because I always find all this information intriguing, but keep on asking questions and we'll try to answer those live for you.
Perfect. Can you folks see the console?
We can.
Okay, so what you're looking at is really Zimperium's mobile first security platform. What you're seeing in the top is a bunch of different modules for different security concepts, right? Whether you are protecting a device or whether you're protecting an app, there are different modules we enable. But when you think about app vetting, what you're looking at is what a customer would see when he comes in, gets our software, rolls it out to thousands of employees who are accessing enterprise stuff on their personal devices, right? So they have an apps dashboard. This is our app vetting engine underneath that's telling them, you have all these apps. Here's how they are rated for privacy. Here's how they're rated for security at a very high level. How many of them are what Zimperium believes are malicious, straight up top, right? How many are high risk, right? Because not every application is malicious or not, right? It probably has some tendencies that you might not like. And we tell which devices have risks with high apps. And all of this, remember, is with the lens of someone trying to determine, are they devices that I should not be giving access to, or I need to rethink how much access they have, right? So this helps decision-making. And then they can actually go into an app and say, I've gotten this insecure bank. Someone has a new banking app on their phone, and they can go in and say, high risk for security, a little bit of information about who the developer is, can say, what permissions do these have? Do any of this concern you? There are multiple files. There are variants of this. And what helps them really is, if you're really interested, if you're a security guy and you want to operationalize this information, you would go here and say, I want to see the entire technical report, right? I want to understand, what is it about this app, right? So they can go in, you get a detailed report, and it tells you why we don't like some of the permissions. How are they compliant, right? Someone has built this app and they violate half the security standards in the industry. How comfortable are you with that, right? So it extensively tells you what we don't like. There's insecure communication. It isn't storing data securely. And there are aspects of these that a lot of security people do not like, right? So reports like these help security teams really understand what is not great about the app and how much of a risk is it to my enterprise, right? So this is one aspect of looking at a public app. Now let me switch gears. Say, what if the same business said, well, I'm building my own apps, right? How can app vetting help my developers and application teams? We have another module, same thing under apps, same secure bank. Let's say you're the one developing this application. This team, the mobile app team, can upload the app into our console, and we will tell you things you're doing great, things that are not great, and there are other things you need to look at, right? But the level of detail here will be different. Because you own the source code, we can tell you a lot more. Like here, this app, it's hard coding secrets and keys. Not great. So we're telling you what the business impact is. There is a recommendation. Which standards are you violating, right? Because they care. Your security team is going to care when they see this. And we also tell you what snippet of code is actually causing that. Maybe this is not a great example, but we actually go down to the level of code and say, this is the line of code you wrote that triggered this finding. Please fix it, right? So because this is meant for development teams, we are able to go down to this level of detail because you are entitled to looking at the source code, right? But again, app vetting just for a different audience. Both of these, the one I showed you before and the one I showed you now, is aimed at helping you build, one, to build secure and compliant applications, two, to ensure your apps that you're pushing to your employees or the ones they're downloading don't pose a threat to the enterprise. App vetting working on two different sides, and that's how we help. And our customers like the fact that you can come to one console, look at all of this, you can integrate it with an MDM, you can integrate it with your DevOps workflows, and after that, it's quite automated, right? Because you have to be able to operationalize this, right? Trying to do this manually will not work. Let me pause and go back to the presentation real quick. Able to see my presentation?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so a little bit, and I'll stop just to allow for some questions. So why are we a leader in this space? Two things. Most mobile app security tooling today, if you go back and look at the business quickly realizes, if I want to solve the mobile security problem, I need 6 different tools, right? And as much as we love open source tools and free stuff, if you are a serious enterprise, this will not scale, right? There will be concerns beyond a point, right? We're seeing a lot of that, right? Mobile app dev teams are great at using open source tools that they like. There's some really good ones in the market. We hear a lot of, there's ProGuard, there's MobSF, there's a whole bunch of stuff. Great start, right? But if you're looking for an enterprise-grade solution, you will need something beyond that, right? And we're the only vendor today that solves both these problems, a mobile device security problem and a mobile app security problem with a single solution. So when you start operationalizing this, you will realize it's a lot less complexity and much easier to deal with within an enterprise. We also have one of the largest mobile research teams that allow us to stay up to date with mobile security. This is going to be a big problem for mobile if you're not already in this space. The rate at which threats evolve require us to pay attention constantly, right? No amount of signatures will help you. You need something beyond that. And a large part of our security is a layered security approach, which combines some signature, behavioral heuristics, and machine learning, because that's what we need, right? We need a holistic solution to keep up with all these threats. Let me stop there to see if anyone has any questions.
One of the things that we did while you guys are getting your questions ready is we linked you to the mobile threat report that Zimperium releases every year. So definitely take a look at that. I know I'm looking at that just to see, where those vulnerabilities lie, like which applications, were notable last year. We also linked you to a free scan. So if you've never used this tool before, you can get a free scan as well, which will probably just give you a little look and feel for how they do things.
Yeah, no, thank you, folks. And again, app vetting, like I mentioned, there's a lot of things you can do. But if you're just looking for a place to start or to get a feel of what some of the app vetting tools like ours are capable of, we're happy to assess an app of your interest and walk you through what our interpretation of that report is, if you would like, to get you started on your journey. And we're happy to help in any other way if you're interested in mobile security. So please feel free to reach out. All right.
And if there are no additional questions, definitely get in touch with Krishna. If you have any questions, do that free app scan. I'm going to be reading the mobile threat report myself. But just one final question from me, because I can't stop. Do you find, and I know that we're kind of moving a little bit away from this with Android, are you finding that's a very difficult ecosystem because of the fact that, historically, app version wasn't necessarily dependent on firmware version? So you could have a really old Android running, whatever version of WhatsApp that you wanted, right? Like a version of Android that was super vulnerable.
Yeah, so it's definitely because of its open nature, right? I think protecting an Android device poses some unique challenges, right? But we are seeing Android kind of catch up to iOS in that aspect as well, right? Limiting the type of software you can run on their phones, minimum versions, and so on. So it is a little bit of a different beast. But going the other way, Apple has been ordered to allow side-loaded apps based on what's happening in the EU. So I think iOS is now about to become a little bit more like Android in the sense that they will have to deal with side-loaded apps and apps from other app stores that are more revenue friendly to developers, right? And I think we will see a lot of that. So I think they will be seeing a lot more Android-like concerns coming up there. Even though they're different, they're becoming very similar.
Just when we think we have it under control, someone throws a wrench into it, right?
True. That's true.
There's one more question from the audience. Are there solutions that would host a personal use segment and a secure encrypted segment for corporate activity, like data and approved apps that you know
So
of?
is that
So very similar to like an MDM type question. Can I, almost like if you think about like the old BlackBerry workspace where you had that personal side, and then you also had your,
So, I mean, on the Android side, we do have customers who use Android for work or for Android Enterprise, as they call it right now, right? But they still use our solution because what they're concerned about is if your device gets compromised, it doesn't matter which side you're on, right? We also have a lot of customers like the idea of mobile application containers, right? MAM solutions, where they do not want to be responsible for the device. But all of those things, as logically divided as they are, the concern they're having is, what if the phone's compromised? And all that partitioning kind of goes away. So there are ways to do it, right? These platforms do allow you some solutions, but no one has been able to answer their problem is, will you tell me if the device underneath is compromised, right? And that's really what we're coming in and helping with, saying, we're helping you attest the device underneath so that you can make a decision on whether that device should have the permissions and the access or not. So we're the additional layer of security, even though you use a lot of those solutions.
Thank you so much for that, Krishna. So if you have questions like that, obviously he is the person to go to, right? So don't forget to grab that link for your free assessment, download the threat report, and certainly reach out if you have any additional questions. But thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us today.
Oh, no problem. Thank you so much. It was a great conversation.
Thank you so much, Lee, Krishna, and Monique, for your great presentation, and to Zimperium for sponsoring this webcast, which helps to bring this content to the SANS community. To our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, including this one, please visit sans.org/webcasts. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS webcast.